he said, this could have some potential to, go up the appellate court ladder. And so we decided to do that. The chamber just bought one of these Apple Macintoshes, and so I sat down and laid out an ad, a quarter-page ad. We weren't going to spend a whole lot of money on this, but a quarter-page ad that we were planning to run in the Grand Rapids Press, and it was going to expressly advocate the election of whoever was going to win the 93rd district primary. Rich Banstra won that primary, and so it would advocate his election. And it was an ad that I made boring by design, and it was real wordy, but it had a disclaimer, and we were going to pay for this out of the chamber treasury, not out of our political action committee. Now, since we didn't want to commit a felony, we went into federal district court and asked for an injunction on the restrictions on corporations in Section 54 of the Michigan Campaign Finance Law. And we drew Judge Richard Hillman, and he listened to our argument for an injunction and denied it, and then laid the case over for trial. Well, the trial really didn't come about for another year, but we in the interim period had discovery and expert witnesses and things like that. And we had a week trial, and we had, although Richard kind of was coordinating all of the briefs, we had Joe Boyden, a mountain of a man. He was a lineman for the University of Michigan once upon a time, and past president of the State Bar of Michigan, basically argue our case at the trial court. And the trial lasted about a week, and Barrett and I testified at the trial. And Judge Hillman basically ruled in favor of the state, upheld the constitutionality of the Michigan Campaign Finance Law, and said that we could speak, the chamber could speak through its PAC. It wasn't being denied its First Amendment right. Well, we knew that this case was going to go up the appellate court level, and we went down to Cincinnati with the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the three-judge panel at the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed Judge Hillman and unanimously ruled that the restrictions in the Michigan Campaign Finance Law were unconstitutional, violated the First Amendment, and that, and ruled in our favor. Well, the state then appealed that decision to the United States Supreme Court, and we had oral argument before the United States Supreme Court, I believe, in
1990.
Well, it was not 1990. It was 1989, in the fall of 1989, and Richard McClellan argued that case before the United States Supreme Court, and we lost. They reversed the Sixth Circuit.
What was the vote?
It was 6-3. Scalia had a very intense dissent that, in fact, he read from, the bench. Thurgood Marshall wrote the majority opinion in the case. And so that's the way it was. It was, the case law that was used to uphold McCain-Feingold. They cited the Austin case as the constitutional justification for banning speech by corporations and labor unions in the 60 days before an election period, through issue ads and things like that. In 1989, a case reached the United States Supreme Court called Citizens United, and I expected a strong critique of the Austin decision in that case, but little did I know that what the court would do is they didn't come out with a decision at the end of June of 2009, and what they did is they bound it over to have oral argument and briefing on the issue of whether, in fact, Austin versus Michigan Chamber of Commerce was wrongly decided and should it be reversed. And so I immediately called Richard McClellan up and said, okay, we got to get back in the saddle here. We've got to file an amicus brief in this case. And working with Richard and working with Gary Gordon and working with John Pirich and Andrea Hansen at the Honigman Law Firm, we crafted up an amicus brief, filed it with the U.S. Supreme Court, and the group of us went out and listened to oral argument before the United States Supreme Court. In fact, Pirich and McClellan got to sit right behind Ted Olson, who was arguing for Citizens United, and Gary Gordon and I were sitting right behind John McCain and Russ Feingold. So it was an exciting time to be there. Olson did a terrific job in oral argument, and we knew that they were going to reverse Austin and rule in favor of Citizens United, and that's in fact what they did.
It was 5-4, wasn't it?
It was a 5-4 decision. Anthony Kennedy wrote the majority opinion. Justice Stevens was the principal dissent in the case. That led then to a federal district court decision called Speech Now versus FEC, and here in Michigan, another case of Michigan Chamber of Commerce, but this time versus Land, against Terry Land. And she had issued me a declaratory ruling that I thought was wrong, and it said that the chamber could do independent expenditures out of its own treasury funds, but we couldn't raise corporate dollars to pool those funds for independent expenditures. We challenged that in federal district court, won before Judge Maloney, and then the department decided not to appeal it, and in fact we filed that under a what's called a Section 1989 action, which meant that the state had infringed on our civil right, the First Amendment, and that they were liable to pay our legal expense. So the case hardly cost us a dime, and that led then to the establishment, not only federally, of super PACs, but in the state of Michigan, super PACs as independent expenditure only political committees.
So this all started with your 1985 sit down with Richard McClellan. It was a 25-year odyssey that led to all this.
Yeah, right? I told the media when they asked me about I said it's nice to see that to be vindicated after 25 years, but it's even nicer to still be alive to see Austin versus Michigan Chamber reversed.
Right. Now, two things that I think you worked on to keep off the Michigan ballot. There was Dodak-Bonnier in 1992, and there was what I call RIMGIN, Reform Michigan Government Now, in 2008. Can you tell us about your role in all that?
In 1991, Lou Dodak and Congressman Dave Bonnier, Lou Dodak being the Speaker of the State House at the time, he and Bonnier basically decided they were going to lead a petition drive to provide for residential property tax relief, which would be financed by the elimination of the capital acquisition deduction under the single business tax. Well, we were concerned about that, and so what we did, first of all, Lou Dodak was financing his ballot question campaign, getting members of his caucus to basically transfer money out of their candidate committee, put it in an office holder expense fund, and then from the office holder expense fund transfer it to this ballot question committee. So I had my friends at Marketing Resource Group come up with a nice brochure on how this money was flowing. And we announced the establishment of the Michigan Business PAC Watch back in 1991, and we said, we're going to be watching to see which business packs are basically feeding the alligators. And then we're going to award them the Alligator Pack Club Award. And we did that early in 1992, and the recipient of that one and only award was the Michigan Auto Dealers Political Action Committee.